Okay, let's see. Doesn't look like anybody's on yet, so. Nope. Okay, looks like we're live. Okay, hi everybody. I'm Kristin Young, the Director of Clinical Services for Herren Project. Welcome to our Lunch and Learn today. Today we have with us a repeat guest who was with us a few months back and I got a lot of positive feedback. So I have invited him to come back and continue the discussion. It's Joe Landry. You want to introduce yourself, Joe, and tell us a little bit about who you are?
Yeah. Hey, Kristin. Glad to be back.
So
My
glad to
name's
be back.
Thank you. Thank you. So yeah, my name's Joe Landry and I'm the outreach and alumni director for a place called Discovery Place down in Burns, Tennessee, just outside of Nashville. It's a men's 12-step long-term program. Yeah, I'm a recovering alcoholic and drug addict, and I think that's probably why I'm here today.
Well,
Yeah.
you have an amazing story, an awesome story. And I feel like a lot of our families and individuals out there that have been struggling long term benefit from your story and what you learned having lived experience and on the other side as the treatment provider. So welcome back. Glad to have you. Just a couple of housekeeping things for everybody out there. If you are joining us via Facebook, please put any questions you have right in the comment section and they will get to us. If you are joining us from the Zoom platform, any questions you have, you can put right into the Q&A box, should be at the bottom of your screen. If you're on a device of some kind or a tablet, you might have to touch the screen first. It could be on the top, but it is the Q&A button. And please don't put any identifying information into your questions. This is not confidential. So if you can identify your loved one via the question, everybody's going to know it. So just try to keep it as confidential as possible. So Joe, today we're here to discuss how to best support your loved one in their move towards recovery if they're resistant, right? So if they don't want, how do we help someone that doesn't want help?
Right.
Kind of an oxymoron, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the question, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously I've got some experience as the family member who didn't want help.
Yep.
I've got some experience as the family member who wanted some help. And then obviously on the other end, working with families of both.
Right.
And so, I know for me, my treatment journey started at the age of 15. So when I was living in Maine, it was go to juvenile hall or go to treatment. So that was I say it was an easy decision. It took me some, deliberating to come up with, yes, I'll get some help and go to treatment. I was a little arrogant back then, still can be, but, and then over the next 18 years, found myself in positions where I definitely needed help. My family certainly wanted to help me, but I was unwilling to receive that help. And so my family is actually all in recovery. So it's a not a super unique situation, but they certainly had some tools that a lot of the families that I work with today maybe don't have, and a lot of their own personal experience. Not to say they did it perfectly. There were certainly times if you asked my mother and father, or brother or sister, did you do it right? They probably would have made some different decisions. But, the truth is, it's really, really hard, as anyone knows, whether, you're the person suffering or you're the family member watching, a loved one basically kill themselves and destroy their lives. It's very difficult to set aside those emotions and that fear and make, rational, practical decisions. And so, one of the, I think, the question is, how do you help someone who doesn't want help, right? And, I think the word help maybe needs to be defined.
Mm-hmm.
So what is help? I know, and there are many schools of thought on this, and I don't have this is the way. I think anybody that tells you this is the way, I don't know. don't generally hear that, especially when you're coming to something that's so big and it's so many factors and all that. And you're talking about an internal willingness of a person, and just things that are really calculable. And so, when it comes to someone who really wants help, I think that there's maybe an illusion that there's going to be a guy or a gal who's like, okay, I'm completely willing and I am done and I want help and I'm completely surrendered while they're still drinking and drugging.
Right.
And, so there's maybe I know sometimes in 12-step fellowships and some other places, it's like, well, are you 100% committed? And if you're not, then you're not ready. And that's not my story. My story is that I was beat up finally and in a lot of pain, but I was still, if I had a few moves left, I would have taken those moves. I just happened to run out of options. And the way my family helped me hit that bottom is to pull my resources.
Yeah.
So the final straw, if you will, my mother's an Italian mother, loves feeding her babies and, just that kind of home. And, I called her, I may have told you this last time, but, I called her, I was 33 years old. I'm living in East Nashville. I'm a, IV heroin addict, and I'd run out of everything and no electricity and just a really dark place. And I called her with some BS story about I got some check coming on Friday, some imaginary check.
Friday. Yeah. I didn't get
enough.
I didn't get what I was supposed to in my paycheck this week, right?
Yeah, my money's tied up overseas in a Swiss bank account, some shenanigans. And I was like, but can you? I forgot to get groceries. I'm pulling on those food heartstrings. I had gotten my dough, but I was hungry. And so I was like, can you get a pizza and put it on your credit card and ship it to this address? And there was just this silence, and she said, you're breaking my heart. And she hung up on me. And, I look back on that and, what really happened after that phone call, for me personally, the way I was as an addict, it didn't really affect me at that moment. What I did was, okay, well, that didn't work. What's the next thing I can do to get some food? I didn't sit there and actually process the fact that my mother said, you're breaking my heart, and wouldn't buy me a pizza. Like the full implication and weight of that didn't hit me. It was just, okay, well, now I need to go, steal something from a convenience store. But looking back on it, when all of my other resources were gone and mom's was saying no to the pizza and all those chips were down, I did 2 weeks later finally call my father and say, I need help.
Right.
And I think what's really hard for families to understand, one of the first questions I ask families when they're calling and saying, hey, my son needs help. He's not asking for help, but we think he needs help. And, at that point, I'm saying, well, are you helping him financially? Well, no, I would never pay for his drugs. Well, no, I stopped paying his rent. Okay, well, what about his cell phone bill? Yeah. Well, I do pay the cell phone bill. And what about food? Well, yes, I don't want him to starve. And, what's hard to understand is that there's a bucket of resources. And anytime those resources can be allocated to booze and dope, that's where they're going to go.
Yep.
100% of the time.
Similar conversation. Yep.
Yeah. And so, beginning that process of pulling the resources, and again, we redefine what help is or what the loving thing to do is. Yeah. So the loving thing, it feels like, oh my God, I couldn't, and the one I hear all the time is, well, I'm not going to let him live under the bridge. Yeah. I'm just not going to do that. Right. So you have a guy that maybe checks into treatment and for anyone that's been in and around the treatment game, there's a thing that happens around week 2. I'm desperate on day 1. I get there and I'm grateful and humbled and, the food's great and the counselor's great. And then about week 2, the mind fires up. Yep. And nobody's doing it right anymore. And I got to get home and I miss this and that. And then mom.
Everybody here is different than me. No one here is like me. Yep. Somebody stole from me yesterday. You should see this place. It's awful. It's dirty. There's bugs, right? This is the story. And I'm not saying this to be funny. It's real. And for those that struggle with this, you're going to get these phone calls the first few times they try, and you're going to really buy into it and think that it's
Mhm.
real. And I'm not saying sometimes some of it can be true, but you
Mhm.
always want to have a conversation with somebody at the center before you believe it 100% and find out what's going on with your loved one.
That's right. That's right. I mean, it got to the point where when I was one of the counselors at Discovery Place before this role, I had a list of 10 things that were like the most commonly said things. And one of the first conversations I would have with mom or dad, I'd say, look, I just want to prepare you. Here's what you're probably going to hear.
I do the
And
same.
they've toured the facility and they see that, how beautiful it is and all that stuff. And so they know what it actually looks like. And so I just want to prepare you that your son is not doing this out of any sort of like vindictive or, malicious. He's sick,
Nope. Yep.
and he's trying to get his way. And to get his way, these are some of the most commonly used tools, because he doesn't have any new tools yet at 2 weeks sober for him to get what he wants. And what he wants is to be back home in his bed because he misses it. And more so than that, there's an underlying obsession to change the way he feels. So, he might not even be consciously saying, I want to go get high. But what we've learned and what I've learned about my alcoholism or addiction, whatever you want to call it, this thing that centers in my mind, is that around week 2 of sobriety, then it starts getting really loud inside my head, and I start getting really restless and really irritable and a lot of fear and guilt and shame and years of, carrying around this sack. And
Yep.
I don't know it's happening necessarily because I don't have that much awareness, but I know I want to change the way I feel.
Right.
And it's going to be better at home.
Right. And this is, I mean, from the geek in me with the neuroscience background, there's neurology behind the reasons why this happens, right? All of a sudden you've cleared up, you're no longer high, but your brain is not healed, right? Your neurology is a mess. We know this from brain scans. So the brain is very sick. The midbrain is screaming for the drug because the pain has come. Now, like you said, you're sitting and everything that pre-existed the addiction, right? All of that pain that was there prior and all of the new pain you've created throughout the use, right? All of that trauma, it all comes flooding back. And anytime you feel pain, your brain has learned to use a drug to remove it, right?
That's
So the
right.
pain comes, and all of a sudden that middle part of the brain is like, you got to use, dude. Like, and even if it's not conscious, because this is a subconscious a loop, a subconscious loop, right? So it's driving you to get out, to get back to where the drug is accessible, right? And what's not strong yet is, hey, there's no coping skills, because no one that's been on the streets using for, or even not on the streets, anyone that's been using for a significant amount of time has no coping skills outside of the removal of pain by a drug, right? And that cortex, the outside of the brain that's conscious, does not have the ability yet to go, hold on a second, this thing is killing us, we got to stay here, right? So that's treatment. Treatment helps that process take hold. And I always like to explain to people, and if those of you are repeating, have come to many of these, that midbrain is the devil and that cortex is an angel, right? This is the best way I have to explain it. When your loved one is first in recovery, that devil is huge and loud, and that angel is tiny and soft, right? And what does treatment do? It helps the angel grow and the devil shrink, right? Which is why we got to keep them in there for as long as we possibly can, because this isn't easy. It's a really hard neurological process that has to take place, and it's science. This is not, my kid's just weak, he just, he can't, he has no ability, he's just a bad person, right? It's not the moral and ethical issue that we used to look at it 40 years ago, 30 years ago. Now we know, science is saying, no, this is a neurological issue, right? So that's what you're describing right now. The science behind it is that midbrain screaming for the drug, the cortex not having the ability to mitigate this at this point, right? And all you want to do is get out and get that pain removed in some capacity, right? And you're right, it's not always they're sitting there like, I got to get out to use. Sometimes it is, but it's not always the case. And I always like to make sure, I'm glad you said that, because I feel like families assume their loved one's lying to them every single time. And that's not necessarily the case. Sometimes they're not even aware that this is going on because it's so subconscious. So I'm sorry, I always have to jump in at that point though, Joe, because I like to discuss the neurology, because we got to fight the stigma against this. And until we do, it's going to be tough. And to be able to really fight this disease, which we've made some progress, but we got a long way to go.
Yeah, no, I love that. And you know, I of course have a lot of the experience of, you know, what it looks like, but learning about what's really going on with me, I think is important. Now, I think my experience was trying, this is kind of a side note, but trying to get sober, I thought I could learn what you're talking about and then get better and then just be better, you know. And you know, so I was the guy that would be in treatment, and I would call mom and dad and say, well, I've learned everything I need to learn, and so I'm doing the same thing, but I was just now utilizing this knowledge as a weapon or as my tool to get what I want.
Absolutely. I mean, that's like saying, I had a major heart attack, I went to the hospital, and now I know what happened to me, so I'm ready to go. Right. When the doctors are like, dude, you're not ready to go. Right. That's essentially what we're talking about.
Yeah. And I think if, you know, if there's ever one message that I want to just be a carrier of it, that is, you know, alcoholism, drug addiction, that's the thing that's going on with me sober. And alcohol and drugs have been a solution to that thing in my mind.
Yes.
You know, I mean, for me, like that, it sums it all up, because
it's
if
a symptom, it's not the problem.
It's a symptom.
Yep.
And so, you know, when we're looking at alcoholism and drug addiction as, you know, if the drug or the alcohol, the substance as the problem, of course, if we're coming in from that angle, then yes, the solution is not want to do it, you know, be willing to not do it and just don't do it anymore. And if you stop doing it, then your life will get better. And you know what's interesting, you know, the science, not really science, but the science of not doing drugs and alcohol, some interesting things will happen to you just as a direct result of not buying dope every day and drinking booze. And that is, it's like finding money on the ground. You know, you're going to have some more money. Is he not spending all on booze and dope? You physically will begin to heal, you know, from the detox and from restless sleep and all this type of stuff. So, your relationships will potentially get a little bit better. You'll start peeing clean on your urine test for your PO, and you'll maybe stop going to jail because you're not doing felonies before breakfast, you know, to get more dope. And so these things will happen as a direct result of not drinking and drugging. Now, none of those things are a treatment for alcoholism and drug addiction. Those things are all a byproduct of not doing drugs and alcohol. You know, so something I've learned about myself anyways, I'm very careful not to judge my progress in recovery based on what's going on externally in my life, because this is an internal deal, you know. And as we, if we want to start talking about the healing process, you know, so what is it that heals? You know, if we're in recovery and we're recovering, like what is it that's getting better? You know, and so, you know, again, being sober, just abstinent from alcohol and drugs, some interesting, great things will happen. And obviously, those are the catalysts that get us to treatment. Right. You know, so it's really easy to focus on those things and say, well, okay, well, I'm sober and I'm not, you know, I've got some money, I'm not homeless anymore, and I'm not this. And those are all really great things and all part of a, you know, rebuilding a life and all that. But the thing that's going on inside me, like you said, the thing that was going on with me before the alcohol and drugs, the trauma that happened during it, the restlessness, the irritability, the fear, the guilt, the shame, all that just internal witch's brew of madness, that is what needs to be treated on a daily basis. Absolutely. You know, and that's the process. And you know, I mean, you and I, you know, we're talking about this because we know we're in it, we're around it, and we're working with folks all day. But you know, I think that this conversation you and I are having right now is not a common conversation.
No, it really isn't.
It's not.
I mean, you know, I have it all the time, and I'm sure you do, but it's not regularly discussed. And this is why we need to put out more information for families. And I know you guys are doing some of that. A lot of treatment centers are really starting to work with families. We're really trying to get as much support as we can for families because of this, because families are really the ones. I often tell the families I'm working with, unfortunately, your loved one isn't well enough right now to make these decisions for themselves. So it falls on us. We have to change first. And this is a hard concept, especially, and I want to kind of tie back to what you were talking about earlier about redefining the idea of help, right? Because as a human being in this world, when I was going through this with my ex-husband, my idea of help, even somebody who was at the time becoming a clinician, my idea of help was still, well, I'll just make sure the bills are paid. Maybe if I give him a little, I'll make sure he's fed. Maybe then he'll use less. Right? Maybe then he won't need to use as much. Maybe he'll come forward. So I do more and more and more of that, because that to me is the definition of help, right? And that's what I would need if I was in a similar situation in my mind. I would just need somebody to come in, make my life easier for a little while so I could get ahead of my issues and then go back out there and be fine, right? But I don't have substance use disorders. So it actually, for most people, it actually makes them sicker. And that was my experience, right? So as a loved one, we have to redefine that, what help means for this realm. It's the only disease that does not respond to that. Every other disease, it's helpful to wrap your love around somebody. But in your prime example, my situation was too, it just doesn't work. We got to do the work as the family member. We have to start making really hard decisions that leave us. And this is the part, Joe, that, I feel like a lot of people who are in recovery don't always know, is the amount of anxiety it's causing the family members to make these tough decisions. To all of a sudden, we can't sleep, we can't eat, we're a mess. It feels like you're literally letting your loved one die. So it's a really hard, and I'm saying this for the benefit of anyone that's listening today, we get it. Like, I get it. I get how hard it is and what we're talking about today, which is why we always say, what are you doing for yourself? Right. And I'm sure you see a lot of this.
Yeah, I mean, you make a ton of great points, and I'm glad you said that. I mean, we do understand, and it is hard. And I think I talk about it a lot, so I begin to have a little more lightness around it, because
Right.
I'd probably lose my mind if I didn't.
Right.
Because we're dealing with these just heavy, tragic situations on a daily basis. But like you said, it's scary. Well, it's scary.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about saying, I'm not gonna, we have guys that will say, I'll kill myself
Yeah.
if
Oh,
you
I hear
don't,
it all the time.
if you don't give me $50, I will end my life. Now, I can't imagine as a father hearing that from my child and saying, no,
Right.
you can't have the $50, even though it's just, so we're talking about things that are just, way
Heartbreaking,
outside. Yep.
hard, and
Yep.
and this is, and again, as a family member myself, if we don't have the right amount of support and you don't have somebody that you can call to say, what the hell do I do? My son is saying he's going to kill himself if I don't give him $50. Like, what if he does? The rest of my life, I'm not going to be able to live, because I'm going to blame myself.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And that's yeah, that's where the personal work in programs like Al-Anon, beginning to get free. And so there's a few ways few analogies and a few ways to help folks kind of understand what's really going on with their loved one. And so the obsession is what we're talking about. So under the influence of an obsession, it's like tunnel vision.
Yeah.
Like I want this thing, I can't stop thinking about this thing, whether that's the booze or the dope, or sometimes in relationships. This can be with men and women. This obsession is absolutely a thing. And so the question I generally ask is, well, how much time are you spending just in constant thought about your loved one?
Right.
Just try to give them some perspective. And so, imagine that times 1,000. That's the way their mind is running about this substance.
Right.
And so, and there's also a mechanism in the mind that says, like, I know it's a bad idea. I know that there's going to be pain as a result of this, but I want to feel good now, and I'm going to deal with the consequences later.
Right. And you know what I say to that, Joe? Is we as family members actually get that, because we are as obsessed with saving you as you are with the drug. Right. And there's actually Maureen Kavanaugh had once told me about a study and sent me a study that actually shows that they did brain scans on people with substance use disorder when they were thinking about their drug of choice, about getting their drug of choice, and brain scans on the family members that love them who were thinking about getting their loved one to treatment. And what do you think it showed?
Wow.
The exact same thing. This is why, you guys, and I'll speak for myself here, but I know, many people can relate to this, is we get crazy, right? Like we get insane. We do crazy things to save our loved ones, just like they're doing crazy things to get their drug, right? And we become this perfectly matched, symbiotic, sick one person almost, right? And when we talk about enabling and codependency and enmeshment and all those fancy terms, that's really what we're talking about, is we are equally sick, right? And this is where it becomes our responsibility as family members to get better first, I think, and then try to help the person that doesn't want the help, try to help them face the consequences of their decisions so they can eventually get through that sick neurology and teach that cortex, that angel, that it doesn't want to do it anymore because it's causing more pain. But a well-fed, comfortable in your bed individual who's using drugs to escape pain is almost never going to seek help, right? And it actually makes sense to me as a human behavior specialist, I guess you'll call it. It's when we're comfortable, we humans, we don't change, right? I don't stop eating cake until my jeans are too tight, right? I literally have to be uncomfortable in my pants before I'm like, no, maybe I shouldn't have that cake tonight, right? And it's a phenomenon that I think when we think about it, we can all relate to. As long as I'm comfortable, I'm not changing anything. It's not till I'm uncomfortable in some aspect of my life do I start to think about change. And then even as somebody who's not, sick with a substance, neurologically ill from using an outside substance, I still struggle with change. I still struggle with that changing my behavior piece, right? And that's the human condition right there. And then throw the psychoactive issues that the drugs cause on top of that. I mean, you guys, to me, and I say this all the time, you're heroes. I don't know if I could be strong enough to overcome it, but so many people do, right? It's amazing, but not when you're comfortable.
No. I mean, that's exactly it. And, I think another thing to consider, and I think everyone who's been on either side of what you're describing can relate to this, the feeling of, let's talk about the family member for a moment. And I'm sure you can probably relate to this. When you're thinking about your person, your family member, losing your mind, there's some sort of fear. Are they okay? Are they alive? Are they dead? And it's just that feeling in your stomach, the pit, the mind racing, and then you talk to them.
Yeah.
The feeling of relief that comes from just a conversation. So the mind is going and, oh my God, where are they doing? Where are they at? And then all of a sudden you get the call, hey, I'm okay, blah, blah, blah. The thing in the stomach goes away. I mean, so there's a physiological change in the body that takes place from a conversation. And so imagine again, that same type of thing in the mind, but the obsession is, I want the dope.
Yeah, the drug.
I need the thing. And so I know that relief is just, $50 away or whatever it is. I'm going to get that same relief. And so, understanding just how powerful this deal is, and then the next thing to consider is, again, a lot of these are just attitudes, that we're bringing just new, perspectives and new attitudes to bring into these situations. And then of course, some different actions, but, another attitude would be, okay, imagine that it's a sick child. And again, we may have talked about this last time, but for me, it's the best way to describe it. And that is, your 5-year-old child has a stomach ache, and you take the child to the doctor and they run some scans, and the doctor, finds that his appendix is about to burst and says, all right, sits the child down. I'm gonna have to cut you open, buddy. And I'm gonna have to use this big knife, and I'm gonna cut out your appendix and I'm going to sew you up with this big needle and, but you're going to live. It's going to be okay. Well, that 5-year-old child is not going to want that to happen. He's going to want to go home and go to his bed,
Right.
but us as the parent or the not sick child need to make that tough, rational decision, even though it involves a knife going to your child,
Yep.
because it's going to save his life,
I love
you
that.
know, and so, it's really not far off from what happens in alcoholism and addiction. And that is, the child is going to say, no, I just need $100. I just need 5,000. I mean, the insanity of mine is that I ended up from, homelessness. I asked for help, ended up in the psych ward. I'm there for 5 or 6 days. And I mean, I asked for help. I was like, I'm done. I need the help. And 5 days in the psych ward, all of a sudden I had some ideas, and it was all set up for me to go to Discovery Place. And my mother, God bless her, she picks me up from the psych ward and I'm in her car, sweet lady. She's going to let me stay one night at their home.
Oh, the one night.
Because
Yep.
one night, because
one
there was
night.
only just one night, because there was a waiting list.
Yeah.
And so, I had to wait this one night. And so as soon as I got in the car, I'm a 33-year-old man at this point. And I was like, Mom, I hear you about this treatment thing. And I know, my brother had gone through and he was sober. And, I know it's a good place and I totally want to do that. But what I really need is $2,800 and a ride back to East Nashville. I got to take care of these things. And I mean, I had this whole thing. And she kind of looked at me and was like, honey, you just left the psychiatric unit.
Right.
You're going to treatment, like just dumbfounded. But I could, like, it made perfect sense to me.
Yeah.
And I look back at, and what's insane about that is that I was sober. And I think that's always important to point out, is that there was no alcohol and drugs in my body at that point. I look back on it now, 6 years in recovery and a little less crazy, for sure.
Right.
But I look back on the way I was thinking and what was just going on with me, and I'm the same person, like I'm the same dude, same brain and all that, but something has changed internally. I've come into reality a little bit. And I love, there's a great line that talks about, alcoholism addiction, that we are in full flight from reality, and that recovery is a flight back into reality. And so by the time I got to that place at 33, I was living on a different planet for real. What was real, what was not real, just completely out of my mind. And so to trust that guy with, his health and his safety, like that's where we as the family members and the folks that are not under the influence of this powerful obsession and this delusional thinking and all those other symptoms, we need to be the ones that make those hard, super hard, scary, rational decisions that will actually help the loved one get some real help. Yeah.
And I love the story that you told last time about how you were like literally sitting in an apartment with no electricity and like no plumbing, and thinking that you were going to go be like a CEO of a company or something like that. Because we do, this is real. It happens all the time. It's like there's this grandiose thinking that really comes from a place of illness, right? But it's very real and very true. It's never like, I just need to kick the drug. It's usually like, I just need a couple days to get my act together, and then I can come out and I'm going to get a job and my whole life's going to be different and everything's going to be great. And no matter how many times you're proven wrong, it still exists in the beginning for a lot of people. Not
for me, for sure. Yeah. And a lot of the men I work with, I mean, so the quick synopsis is that I had a successful life at one point, and I had this great job and all these things. And, there's so many interesting symptoms of, and when I say alcoholism or addiction, I'm just talking about this thing that's going on in my mind, and there are symptoms of that are personality traits. There's things like fear and, shame and how we react to life. There's just a lot to all that. But, one of those things is certainly delusional thinking. And, my deal was that I had this stage character, this guy that I presented to the world. And I wanted you to see this person that I wanted you to see, and what I've learned is that deep down, I'm not good enough at anything. There's just core belief inside me that is, I'm not good enough. If you see the real me, you're going to run away. You're not going to like it. You're going to run away. And from that core fear, there's all sorts of other things that stem from that. And one of these is this character. I mean, I had worked overseas and had come back, to the States to work. And 5 years after I got back from Ireland, I was meeting people like, yeah, I just got back from overseas, like 5 years ago.
Right.
Like I'm living in this thing, but I got to be this guy who I just got back from Europe. And it's this whole thing because I'm scared to death inside. I'm completely crippled by fear and what you think about me, and scared about the future and guilt and shame and, all the insanity that goes along with that. But then in my mind, like we were talking about, I'm sitting there with no options, but I'll move away from getting it all back.
Right.
It's been 10 years since I've been in the corporate world at that point. And I'm sitting in a trap house thinking I need to get my LinkedIn profile together. I need to get a suit, get it tailored. I'm literally stealing food from a convenience store.
Right. Yep.
But this is what's going on in my mind. And so again, just looking at it like the mental illness that it is, when a guy like me at 30 days sober is telling you how I'm doing, I have no clue how I'm doing. I have no clue. And that, I think, is where society can begin to open its mind and change a little bit on this whole deal, which is that, the days of like, I'm going to go to treatment for 30 days and get fixed. And then if I relapse, it's just because I don't have willpower. And if I relapse, it's because I didn't do something right. It's just wrong, and it needs to be changed. And, our program, for example, is long term. And, there's guys 6 months in the program that are doing the deal, that are willing, that are the whole thing. And they're still under that influence.
Yep.
6 months in,
Right.
And so, just trying to take a step back and say like, hey, and another way to put it is, hey, 20 years into the woods, it's going to take more than 30 days to get out, that kind of deal.
That's one of the biggest issues, I think, in our system, is this idea that somehow, and right now it's probably more an insurance based issue than anything else, right? That 30 days and you're good, right? And that's based on the idea that physically all of the drugs and all of it is out of your system and you've had enough time now to be able to go out and be fine. But the psychological / emotional / neurological stuff isn't going to end for like years, really, right? But I often say, if we could get most people a year of some sort of supported environment, right? It doesn't have to be an inpatient stay, but you guys do it awesome with the step downs along the way and the continued support, right? I don't necessarily think anyone should be back home for a year, right? Because it's an insidious disease and it will sneak up on you, and it will sneak up on you, and at any moment, even when you think and you're sincere in the fact that you think you have it beat. And that's, again, science. I just want to quickly, Joe, read, we have a comment that was sent from someone who's on with us. She said, thank you both. Thank both of you so much for your insight into not just getting clean, but explaining the science behind the whole idea of getting clean. The neurological component is real and so important. I explained this to my friend who is not an addict. It gave him an understanding and compassion for the fight his son was in to get sober. So yeah, thank you. I'm glad that we can be here today talking about this, because I do think, as a family member myself, that that's a really important piece, because we're coming from our own experience with humanity and being a human, and we don't get it. So we gotta put some time and energy and effort into understanding the disease of addiction and substance use disorder, and what are the best ways to help. And Joe spoke earlier about how there are different pathways, and there are many different pathways to recovery. It's not just one way, and there are some people that don't need to get to the point that Joe got to before they reach out for a helping hand. There are different degrees of neurological sickness based on how long somebody has been using drugs, right? There's also this idea of problem use versus substance use disorder. So I was problem use when I was in my, teens and early 20s. I never transitioned into substance use disorder. We don't really know why I was protected, probably genes, honestly, because I worked really hard at becoming, because having an addiction, and I just didn't happen. And one day I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I went on with my life. And those of us that have those experiences have a really hard time understanding why you couldn't stop, right? Because I did. So if I stopped, why couldn't you, right? I do believe in the idea that there is a genetic component to this, right? I mean, your whole family, you said, Joe, has struggled, right? So there's definitely a genetic component. And I talk about this because really what I want to get at is that everybody is not the same, but if you are doing the same thing over and over again and thinking you're going to get a different result, you're wrong. You're not. So you got to try different things until you hopefully get to a point where you find something that's worked. So if you have tried the craft method, right, and that hasn't worked, then try something else. There are some people who the craft method will work for, right? And then there are some people, most of the time people who are in more late stage addiction, where it's probably not going to help much. It's probably going to enable the addiction more, right? So do your homework, try different things, try shutting off the phone first before you kick them out, right? Like try these different things to see what might work. But don't keep doing the same thing over and over again and thinking you're going to get a different result, because you're probably not.
No, you're so right. And just something as simple as pull the phone. I love that. Pull the phone and see what happens.
Yeah. For your 17-year-old that's abusing marijuana, that could be very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And, again, we as addicts and alcoholics, we are master manipulators, And again, it doesn't come from a place of like, I'm a bad guy. I was taught right from wrong. And like deep down, like I love my family and I want to be a part of society and all these things, but under the influence, I will say and do anything to get what I want. And, the most common thing that we as family members see and we as folks that are sick do is, we start with the kindness.
Yep.
So I'm going to start with, oh, Mom, like, here's the deal. And, it's all kind of light and all this. And then if I'm told no, then I'm going to come over the top with the anger, and then I'm going to come with threats, and then I'm going to come with these things. And, I can't imagine, as a family member sitting and having to listen to the things that, they get told from folks like me. And, but standing strong and just sticking to your guns and saying, no, like, I'm sorry, it's not going to happen. The fear is that they're going to go out and either hurt themselves or, you're going to be the one that, said no. And that was the catalyst. And there's nothing I can say to a family member to say like, that's not going to happen. Other than in my experience personally and working with many, many men and their families is that, until that happens, there's probably a good chance they will not recover.
Yeah.
And so it's scary. It's super scary. And, I really commend any families out there that can actually do that and put up with all the shenanigans and all the threats and all the things. And, but I can also tell you that there are hundreds and hundreds of guys and their families. I mean, I get letters and cards and phone calls and emails from happy family members where their loved ones are years sober. Thank you so much. It was so scary. All the pictures,
right? When you get a guy that you were like, oh man, I hope he gets it. And you think they're not going to get it. And all of a sudden, 3 years later, you get a picture of him with his newborn baby and his new wife. Right? Like there's like every time I see it, I get choked up because it happens. It happens a lot. So you can never lose the hope,
No. I mean, there's ton of hope.
Tons of hope. And one of the things, and this is a really hard thing to talk about, and it's oftentimes really hard for me to say to families, but it's also not your loved one's job to remove your anxiety. Right? So our loved ones actually have a right to ruin their life if they want. And I hate saying it like that, but there's no other way to say it. Right. And it's not their job to make us feel better about their choices. That's our job. We have to figure out how to manage our anxiety. And what happens when we're in that scenario is we get angry and we start to tear them down. And I get this, and I've done it. And so there's no judgment in this whatsoever. It's like, I'm incredibly anxious. You're not doing what I want you to do to take away my anxiety. So therefore you're a loser, and you're XYZ, expletive, exclamation mark, right? And and this is why, it's because we're super anxious and we're blaming them for our anxiety. And we got to learn to manage that. We have to figure out how to manage our anxiety based in their choices, right? Because they're really not doing this intentionally. When you were saying when you're talking about the lying piece, I've learned that none of your loved ones actually want to lie to you. They really don't. Okay. And on the other side of that, they feel really guilty, and it adds to the self-hatred that they already have. They don't want to hurt you. Right. So we have to go into this understanding and kind of assuming that somebody who's actively using is probably going to lie to us. I look at it like the beast trying to keep itself alive instead of the person, right? Because the person's kind of separate. The person's not, he's in there, she's in there, but the beast has taken control, right? And that beast wants to keep itself alive. So it will do anything to keep itself alive, right? So when I'm working with people, which of course it's a lot easier when it's a professional relationship versus a personal relationship. I'm not going to say that I have reached any level of perfection in my personal life, but that's why I always say no judgments, right? But when it comes to, controlling our behavior, we have to anticipate and kind of accept who they are right now and know they're not doing it intentionally, and try not to launch into that anger and resentment. That's definitely human, right? But it's not helpful. And this is where our boundaries come in. So us learning how to put boundaries around it, to not sit in it and listen to that, because if I'm sitting in it and listening to it, or sitting in the living room and allowing it over and over and over again, I can only take so much as a human being before I'm going to lash out. And that's normal. So we have to learn to say, there's the door, and if you don't leave, I'm going to call the cops, right? Because we got to protect ourselves and protect them as well from themselves to an extent, because they're going to sober up someday and have to remember how they treated you, or have to face how they treated you, which is not helping them get sober or stay in recovery. Right. So it's a win-win really when we do that, even though in the moment it feels so awful that you're calling the cops on your child, but it's really sometimes a necessary part of doing this.
Yeah, of course. And then the fear is they're going to hate me, and, all that. And they probably will for a minute. They'll be upset because now they're not getting what they want.
Right.
And, you brought up another really good point. And, thinking about, what's going on in the mind of an alcoholic or an addict when they're wanting that next hit, when they're wanting that next thing, and you're telling them no. Now, there's a different progression to this illness. And like you said, there's stages. There's someone that could be in an early stage of alcoholism and addiction that may say, you know what, I'm sorry, I'm going to stop doing this, and then do that. Now, okay, let's play the game. So if that happens, then fantastic. Maybe the illness has not progressed, to whatever level. Now, if they've told you that 7 times, like to your point, it's not going to happen on time 8. So at some point of the game, we have to stop listening to the words, because again, we're master manipulators. We will, and we'll say it in a way to pull on your heartstrings, and we'll do all, make the big sweet promises. I mean, I've written out, like, I swear I will never do this again, and signed it, like solemn oaths, the whole deal.
And I just want to throw out there too, Joe, this still happens to even us as professionals sometimes, where somebody has a story and your heart they pull you right in, right? We were just actually talking about this, my team, yesterday, when this happened one time with a female client of ours, and we get pulled in. So it's not, even the professionals are not perfect at this, you guys. Like, it's hard. It's really hard.
Well, you want to think, well, maybe they're not that far progressed.
Right.
Yeah, it's just, you're so right, and it happens to me all the time, which is insane, because I'm definitely more on the side of, like, look, I'm not really hearing what you're saying. Show me what your feet are doing, that type of attitude. But I get fooled all the time, because we are so good, and I really, deep down, I want to believe that, like, maybe this person like had the white light experience. Maybe this person is 60 days sober and really is just wasn't potentially an alcoholic. They just kind of got down a bad road and now they're okay. And we just had one a few days ago, you know, a guy that came in and I sat down personally with him a couple times and, you know, worked with him a little bit and, you know, went through the book and he, you know, there was this thing in my mind, it's like, maybe he's not an alcoholic.
Right.
Like really,
Yeah.
you know, and he was his first time in treatment and the whole thing. And you know, and so, you know, family was like, well, you know, he's done 30 days. And normally we go really hard, like, look, let's at least sober living something, you know, like not just back to his childhood bedroom at 27 years old, but which that's a whole other conversation. But, you know, so I was kind of on board, you know, and so this was 5 days ago. Yesterday, he's in the hospital detoxing off alcohol.
Right. Yeah.
And we were sitting, the treatment team was sitting around. We were like, there we go again. Like and it sounded so good. Like, and it looked so good. And, you know, even us that are just immersed in this thing can be fooled. So if you're out there and you're a family member and you've been fooled, don't beat yourself up. We are masters at this.
Yeah.
You know.
And this, I was just talking to, you know, one of my coworkers yesterday who had a loved one that was struggling, and she tells families never to pick them up when they call with the story about how awful the facility was. And she's like, and then what do? I'm right there picking them up. She's like, right. She's like, it's just, it's hard. It's really, really, really hard. So that's why I always say there's no judgments, because all of this, even when you know, you still have a hard time with it. And it's not black and white, unfortunately. We do have another comment. Hi guys, thank you for all you do. I'm the loved one. I think the key that I've learned in this, me surviving, but more so living life instead of waiting, wondering, and living in turmoil. Yeah. It's not easy, but I'm trying. If this person continues to affect my bank account, my apartment, car, health, or job, I'll have to hope and pray from a distance. Absolutely. And, you know, I say in a perfect world, we would be able to stay in it in a way that is safe for us, which is those boundaries, which is never giving them access to anything that they can steal, take from you, not paying for things, but continuing to say, I love you and I believe in you and I believe you can do it. And when you're ready, I will pick you up and I will drop you off at the detox. Right. And that's, and continuing that, even if we don't hear from them, just a message that says, hey, I love you and I believe in you and I'm still here. Right. Because the other thing that I hear is that a lot of times people don't think they're deserving of your love. They don't think you care about them. They start to believe the world is better off without them. And we just kind of got to let them know, if we can, that we're still there. Right. If they're abusing you in response to those texts or emails or whatever, then that's a different conversation. Sometimes you just have to pull away altogether. But the hope is that as loved ones, we can stay in it in a way that's safe for us, so they still know that there's someone out there rooting for them and someone out there that loves them.
Yeah, you're right. And I think one of the hardest things, you know, I've talked to old, you know, girlfriends and, you know, folks that were around me when I was in my madness. And, you know, one of the hardest things to really get on board with is that this is not a moral issue. Yeah. And they're not doing this thing because they don't love you. Because as someone who's the recipient of that type of abuse or whatever, you know, whatever you want to call it, is saying to themselves, I know they are because I've been this person on the other side and not quite the same situation, but similar. Well, I would never do that to someone I loved.
Right. So therefore you must not love me. Yeah.
That's it. And so that, I mean, that math makes sense. And it's a very human thing to do. I mean, I do it in my relationship today, like just in little things like, well, why would you say it to me like that? You know, like I would, you know, just, you know, all that type of stuff that goes on in the mind. Now, we're not even talking about like, hey, I stole your checkbook and, you know, didn't show up for 3 days.
I hate you and you're the reason why I'm dying. Right. Like, because that's what oftentimes comes up.
And so I think getting on board somehow in the mind, again, this is just an attitude shift. This isn't anything that happens externally. This is just something in here that says, this is a sick person.
Yeah.
Like this is mental illness. They are sick and detaching, you know, with, like you said, with love. Yeah. Like I can love you from a distance and say, I love you so much. I support you if you want to get help. And one of a mother said this to me one time, long time ago when I first started working in this field, but she said, I told my son, I'm going to stop watching you kill yourself. I'm not going to be a part of that anymore.
Yep.
I love you. And when you're ready for help, I am here for you, and I will pay for you to go to treatment, and I will be there to support you. But when it comes to helping you right now, I'm not going to be a part of it.
Yeah. We talk about this in group all the time. And that's exactly what we say is I'm not going to be watching you kill yourself any longer. I can't do it. It's killing me. So therefore I have to take a step back. Right.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean I don't love you and I'm not here when you're ready to make a change.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And also, by the way, hang the phone up when they're in a place where they're manipulating you or they're name calling or whatever, and you're trying to argue sanity with somebody who in that moment is not sane. Right. Stop. Goodbye. I love you. Hang up. That's it. No more conversation. I've my mothers that are on the phone at 2 a.m. for an hour and a half talking to a drunk person that is not going to remember one thing that was said the next morning. It's not worth it, guys. It really isn't. You're going to be exhausted and you're going to be grouchy, and it does not get anybody anywhere. So this was awesome, Joe. I love having you on so much. I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can come out and see Discovery Place. I love Discovery Place as well. For those of you, that are watching that are looking for potential places to send your loved one. I went out there. It's a great facility. Absolutely love it. Would send one of my loved ones there. I love the long-term program. It's really a great place. And also throwing in there, I always like to give a plug to the 12 steps if I can too, because I was having a conversation yesterday with a coworker of mine who's also in recovery, who how we were talking about how we should all really do the 12 steps. Like the work that I've done in my life that wasn't 12-step related, and the things that I teach people to do in my therapeutic practice are basically all encapsulated in the 12 steps. So if you guys don't know the 12 steps, even if you're not in recovery, I mean, Al-Anon has a version of the 12 steps as well. So, so does Codependence Anonymous. So those of us that are struggling as family members do have access to programs that can help us go through the 12 steps. It's a great program, really help you with a lot of the issues that are underlying the symptom, right? Which is the use. Mm-hmm. And those of us who aren't in recovery have some of that too. So, and the other thing is, if you're looking for more support, please go to the Herren Project website. We have all kinds of support groups up there that are free of charge, all led by licensed clinicians. We do 15-minute consults with clinicians if you just need some advice one-on-one on which direction to go. And I hope you tune in. I do this once a month, third Thursday of every month. And any thoughts, Joe? Last minute thoughts for you?
Just say no. Just say no matter how hard it is. But yeah, I just thank you so much for having me. I always love talking to you. And I think, this message that we're talking about today, there couldn't be anything more important if you are a loved one, is how to actually help, your person that's sick. So yeah, I hope somebody heard something today. Yeah,
absolutely. And I'm going to use that. I loved it when you said we have to redefine help. I've never thought of it that way. And that's going to be in my talk track going forward. So
it's trademarked, let me know.
Okay.
Send me the royalties.
I'll send all the royalties your way.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Joe. It was great having you on, and you'll definitely be getting an invite back.
Thank you so much, Kristin. Have a great day.
No problem. You too.
See y'all later. Bye.
Bye-bye.